Okay. So I was trying to go live um, from a streaming platform software service, and I finally got it to work with Instagram, but it didn't work. So we're starting over here. All right. Um, so welcome to Monday Musings. My name is Justin Harris, where we're gonna. This is a platform for me to get on my soapbox and talk about things that are on my mind. It's not something that I always tackle in my newsletter, which is called Progression, the Art of Training. So, getting away from like we get into the science of things, but the science just is more about describing what's happening and less on how to kind of apply that. And so, my newsletter is a place where I really dig into like what the problem is for um, the people that I coach or I run into or I see in the industry. And then I often get to a solution. So go to my website, jharriscoaching.fit, or follow me on Instagram, and you can get to my website and sign up for it. Uh, so on Monday Musings, this is where I chat about things on my mind, right? And so one of the things that has been on my mind is it's going to be kind of like a two-parter, and then someone asks a question, and I'll get into. And if anyone asks questions on Instagram or here in the chat, YouTube or Facebook Live, I will answer them. All right, but I'm trying to keep these things to 30 minutes and go from there. So, all right. So the thing that's on my mind is consistency. So I'm trying to create a few, you know, products that people can purchase that kind of go into the art of training. And one of the biggest things, like kind of distilling the information from my newsletter, and one of the biggest things that I talk about, and it's like my number one, it's like my first principle is like consistency is key. And so this product is going to get into kind of like what the kind of core problem is, what are the principles, and then kind of what are the action steps to like navigate for full schedule athletes. So people who are, have a lot on their plate, busy, or a lot of things to juggle. This might be for you. But in consistency, one of the things, kind of like a quick overview is like, most people struggle with consistency. And as we get into kind of a new year, New Year's resolution, stuff like this, the research shows that something like, the average New Year's resolution lasts about like 10 days. So if you make it the month, you're well above average there. And so as people might be seeing this and want to get back into training, or kind of commit to the process more, or engage in the journey, in a different way, or tackle some other piece that they've been struggling with, whether that's like clean eating or getting rid of alcohol, or, adding strength or stretching or mobility, whatever it is that you're joining. And we all have these things that, we're reflecting on, did we do a good job with them or not? Consistency is really um, the biggest thing. And I would say like most people who struggle with consistency don't lack discipline. So all my clients, are a lot of them are, many, if not all of them, are very successful in the areas, the domains that they work in, or in their personal lives and different stuff. And, it's not really about discipline. So when I talk about consistency, people think it's about discipline. It's not really about discipline. What it really is like most people lack a system that works when life gets busy and energy runs low. And so when things are a little bit more chaotic or green, or, we're juggling, a couple things, and then all of a sudden one more thing gets, added in, it's like, what system do we have that works for us? Right. And when it comes to training, it's, most people are like kind of in this all or nothing place. And to me, um, I find that people are really focusing on using motivation to solve the consistency problem. And motivation is really unreliable under fatigue. So here we're using the strategy of like motivation is going to get me through it. And we have motivation at the beginning of the year and stuff like this. But then as soon as things start loading in, right, that um, this the solution kind of dissolves, right? Like when more fatigue comes, and it's not really a character flaw. It's really, it's basic biology, in the brain. So, we want to, what I do with my one-on-one clients is try to like develop, like strategies and solutions, and kind of understand what's going on here. So it's not like a lack of discipline. It's just like we need to create some better systems. And when you start saying that, people go into like protocols and all these things, and it's really like it can get really complicated or rigid. And we really want like simple solutions that are kind of that can be flexible and still get the desired outcome that we want, right? And so one way this kind of shows, and Instagram people, if I would click the YouTube link and go in, because I'm going to show some images and stuff. So, all right. So people are starting to log on. Hello. What's up, Beacon Endurance? Try Run 4, Claire, Jim. How you guys doing? You guys can ask questions or check in or say hello in whatever way you want, and I will comment. But on my YouTube, which is why I was hoping to make this thing work on Instagram Live, but I'll have to troubleshoot that a little bit better. So there are things that are like unstructured or unplanned that come into issues with consistency, like injuries or medical procedures or different stuff like that. And so I just want to like, it's just going to cover my face because I haven't figured out a better way to do that. But so what I'm putting up on YouTube and Facebook Live is essentially these are screenshots from 4 different athletes, and this is their kind of training load through the previous 2 years. All right. So I took 730 days. So I'm going to describe it just a little bit so we can get into it. And it looks a little noisy, but essentially from left to right is, it goes earliest date to the left and current date to the right. The blue shaded in line is kind of, they call it fitness, but really it's chronic training load. So the amount of the 28-day rolling average of training load. So that blue line doesn't respond very quickly to something. Over time, if we're reducing training, it will go down. So any drop down is not necessarily day to day. It's a rolling average of it. And then the shaded in yellow is form, and then the pink line is fatigue. All right. And so form and fatigue. So fatigue is essentially the 7-day acute chronic load. So that is more like a lot closer, like, than the 28-day running average. Right. And so basically the pink line will go in step with the blue line, but it'll be, more sensitive or noisier. And then form, the yellow line, is inverse of fatigue. And so, it's just the complete opposite of it. All right. So essentially, I'm going to show you kind of like a couple different scenarios of how, consistency works out. And so the first example, this athlete has been training for a while. And what you want to see are like kind of like peaks and valleys, right? But we don't want valleys that turn into like kind of lower plateaus. And hi, Claire. And so I'll show you on the Achilles one. If you look all the way, all the way to the right, you see this like big yellow kind of pyramid. That's basically for this athlete after the New York City Marathon. So we take, 4 weeks to like really recover and get back into things. And then we're fully back in training, and things are starting to perk up a little bit with as far as training load goes. So if you look all the way to the right, that quick peak is like a normal build. Well, if we go and you'll see Achilles, this client, it was winter. They usually wear orthotics. They were walking around in stiff boots without orthotics for a week. It snowed. They played. They went sleigh riding with their child and running up and down the hill in non-supportive boots. And then they were just getting ready to do a half marathon. And just like all of that, I think with like holiday stress and different things, kind of compounded in this Achilles issue, right? And this is like when we just started. I was working with the athlete for like 2 weeks, and I was more watching what they were doing and then we were going to get picked up on the back half. and they had an Achilles issue. And this athlete did not stop training. We didn't end up racing because we thought it was is going to cost them too much time. And so, you know, this training that you're seeing, like this, like drop in kind of chronic training load or fitness, um, uh, is really like we couldn't run, so we had to bike and do these other things, and so, but we weren't doing nothing. We were doing something. All right. And so, this is where things pop up. And so, if we didn't have the systems or support, I think this athlete still would have trained and found PT and all these things. But consistency, we created some rules around this, like, hey, like, although we don't love the bike, we have to get back, we have to like continue to train the body. There's kind of three pillars that we're training, like musculoskeletal load. Well, we can't do that too much. We have to be careful because the Achilles can't take too much pressure right now, although it needs some to heal, and you have to be careful with that. Then there's kind of metabolic, what's happening at a cellular level. Well, we can do that on the bike, the elliptical, pool, lifting. We can do it in a lot of different ways. So we still want to train that. And then mental, like we don't, like I call it psychology of the athlete, the spiritual nature, like whatever it is, like how do we regulate and do all these things? Like what do we enjoy or hate? And so we need to like make sure like we're still doing stuff like to keep moving forward, right? And so here we had a reduced musculoskeletal load, and that's mostly what you're seeing there. So anyway, we were able to be consistent, and we were kind of like, as the basically the long-term training load was being reduced, we were able to, like, you see the pink line starting to jab up first, and so there was not a big gap there. All right, second athlete had elective surgery after a fall marathon. And so they just had it recently. So you see this, to the right, over elective surgery, you see like their form really increased. Well, it's just time off. So the short-term training load, was really reduced. And then they technically, if they were training, they're freshening up, right? And this is something that we need to be careful with. What's up, Joyce? Maggie, Pierce. And so, but here's a way for that athlete, they needed 6 weeks off of nothing because they had a surgery, right? And so really you see that pink line, come way down to the right, and because we did nothing. Whereas the Achilles injury, it like kind of came down sharply, and then there's some stuff going on because we could do something. All right, now I'm going to show another two different athletes. All right. So the top athlete had a surgery, and if you look all the way to the right, you see these short pink things, or yellow, pyramids up and down. Those are events and races. So you see how short, a planned time off is. Well, this athlete, same thing as the previous athlete, had a surgery, and they needed 6 weeks of nothing. They couldn't do anything, and so you see how that kind of blue line drops over time. The pink line drops quickly, and not much is happening, and then the form kind of reduces. Right now, this is when it gets a little bit messier. Is this athlete on the very bottom got measles and had low iron, and I think they also had COVID at the same time. So you just see these, like, that form, that yellow in the kind of middle left. It was a long plateau of that, and like one thing after the other kept happening for this athlete. And then we were able to train. We did a race, and then we had an ankle injury, and that really limited what we could do on the musculoskeletal running. Running is more taxing to the body than, from a training load standpoint, than cycling is, for the same duration. So if I have an hour run versus an hour bike, the hour run is going to be more taxing. Okay. And then we were able to kind of train through that. And then all the way to the right is a fall marathon, their first marathon ever. And they were able to have success there. Right. And so, to get back to my point about consistency, is you really need to have, in order to be consistent, you need to have kind of strategies or way, like I call them like action, like an action path, like, steps or whatever, to be able to solve when things are a little bit more chaotic. And as we are getting through the holidays, and I'm looking at, 8 inches of snow, and now it's raining and it's icy, I'm not going to be able to get outside. If I don't have any strategies here or know how to move or, shift, it's going to be a really challenging time for me to be consistent. So, I'll make this product available to everyone. It'll be, priced accordingly. But it's to help people frame what's going on during this time when things are, more balls are getting thrown in to juggle. All right. And we need to have some strategies. So consistency, though, is king in anything that you do. It's like the success overnight story. It's like all of a sudden, uh, they're a success overnight. And I was listening to like the guy, Tony, I forget his last name, or Hinchcliffe, who's like Kill Tony. And it's like he's a 12-year like overnight success, with his Kill Tony set. And it's like they've been doing it for a long time, and COVID almost killed it. But there's been a response since then. And whether you agree with what he's about or whatever, that's not the point I'm talking to. The point I'm talking to is that consistency kills. And if you're take a beginner mindset and you're always trying to be consistent, that doesn't mean you have to run every single day. Sometimes you have to shift down to your lowest, what you accept to be the lowest amount that you'll tolerate or take. And so that could be, there's solutions there. That can be like, hey, I will count 15 minutes or more, right? So 15-minute can be your minimum. My college coach had a running streak for like 15 years or something, and his minimum was 15 minutes. He had a surgery and he ran, shuffled for 15 minutes, and that was that was it, right? It wasn't healthy for him to have a running streak, right? But that was his like minimum viable session, right? Just committing to the warm-up is a big one that I get into when you're not feeling well. Most of us have the weight of like, this session is going to be so big and I'm not going to be able to do it as planned or prescribed or as I wanted to. And then we avoid it. And all we had to do is just put the shoes on or get the gear, jump in the pool and start the workout, and then just get through it the best you can. And those are the days that you learn more about yourself by being consistent. So what's up, Techno Austin? What's up, Austin? Anyway, so on the YouTube and Facebook Live, I'm kind of showing some, visuals for what is in play there. And I'll get better with doing all these things. All right. So yeah, that's consistency is key as we go into the new year, as you reflect back, how can you be more consistent? And to me, that means more training days per week, which doesn't mean no days off. Okay. Doesn't mean no days off. Be mindful of that. All right. But how can you be more consistent on showing up for yourself? And this is not just, training talks. I was reading something on entrepreneurship and business and writing. And it's like, those who are the most prolific in what they do, they show up all the time for themselves. They show up, and then you can help more people. So anyway, I'll open up to any questions. And I do have someone asked a question that I'll present, but since you guys are all here, any questions about consistency or training or New Year's reflections or how to set effective New Year's resolutions, if you believe in that. And so if you're on Facebook or YouTube watching this, which I don't know if I restarted the stream, if it still works. I don't see any comments there, but yeah. What's up, all? Happy holidays. And if it's in the evening, usually I have a glass of wine, but at 11 o'clock, 11:30, I'm not having a drink of wine. What's up, Katie? All right, so I'll get into answering. Someone asked me a question because they couldn't make it, and they'll round back and watch it later. But there's a question. They call themselves a slower runner. I think that's all relative. We always look above us. Like even when I was running 14:42 for 5K in college, which is like 4:45, 4:47 a mile. There was always people faster than me, and I felt like I wasn't that fast at that time. Although I was proud of the time I ran because I overcame a lot. But they were asking about, running slower and having a tough time running faster. They train 4 days a week, if I'm getting this right, and then 2 days of strength. They said that their heart rate was high when they were running slower, but then they said they had a 150 heart rate, and that's not that high. That's okay. You can be there. So the question was really like, should they stay where they're at and focus on cadence, getting their cadence up? Their cadence is at 160. Or should they work on getting their cadence up to try to run a little bit faster? And they're having every time they try to run faster, they get some injury issues. So they they get some injuries. Okay, of course it depends, right? So one of these things is like if all 4 runs are zone 2, then I would say that's probably not the best solution, right? To like solely work on cadence and whatnot, which is like that would be considered like block periodization. So for this block or until I notice something, I'm only going to work on one quality. And that's good for novices and beginners and people who are taking steroids and drugs and stuff like that. It comes from like East Germany or Soviet Union, USSR, and Russia, and stuff like that. So, which the Americans have done too, but really their sport schools were so foundational in how we train today, as well as Arthur Lydiard and what he did in New Zealand, that it's still pressing today. So do I think that this athlete should stay where that? I would ask a million more questions. As my wife says, I ask lots of questions, but we really kind of want to be descriptive in what they're doing. So let's assume that they're doing 4 easy runs a week and then 2 lifts. I would say, yeah, absolutely. Let's like work on getting the cadence up. Now, why are people saying that cadence is, like 160 is low? Everyone has like a Goldilocks point that's just right for them. There's this holy grail of like 180 cadence. Just think of like running as like RPM or cadence times stride length. And so if you have a really long stride plus a high cadence, that's sprinting. And if you have a really high cadence but short stride, that's like shuffling in a certain sense. And this is what happens is when people are running slower, they end up slogging or being lopey and not really getting their cadence up. There's some function, the slower you go, the slower the cadence will be. But it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to go that way. So on the bike and cycling, you can do a slow ride with a high cadence and you can do a fast ride with a low cadence. Like there's all different kinds of things depending on what you're doing. So like triathlon, you want to work on a slower cadence. So you're taxing more of the muscles and less the cardiovascular system because you're out there for many hours. Controversial, but has been really effective for the best athletes. If you look at what their cadences are, they're more like 85 instead of like what pro cyclists are, which is more probably like 95, 90, something like that. And everyone's different, right? So I would say if you're doing 4 zone 2 runs a week, I would say let's get one to be speedier. So maybe that for a minute you're working on high cadence and a minute on high cadence and a minute off, just walking or shuffling. And so there we're starting to impart a little velocity to what's going on and a little bit of workout. And then maybe you do, so that could be a way higher cadence. So you're working for 180 and you can set your watch, like Koros has a metronome that you can set. And so maybe you're shooting for 180 because there's short attention periods. Then, and then there's the next run. So if you went Monday, that's that. Tuesday could just be a normal aerobic run where you're just running, trying to keep the heart rate down. And then maybe, you skip Wednesday and then Thursday, maybe we do longer sessions. So it's like, for 4 minutes or 3 minutes, I'm going to work on a cadence. Like if the natural is 160, I'm going to like do 170 because it's not as drastic. And so therefore we can kind of focus on it a little bit more. And it's about attention. And then, and then we get into the specifics because again, if we have the 3 pillars, musculoskeletal. So we have to be careful there. Not every day can be very high cadence because sometimes high cadence trips into faster running, often does. And so we have to be careful there because we're we feel more comfortable projecting our bodies forward faster with higher cadences, but it doesn't have to be that. And then, what's having a metabolic level. And like, if you're training 6 sessions a week and 2 of them are lifting, okay, we're getting maybe some intensity. It's not guaranteed. The other 4 sessions, I would say like we need some metabolic work there. So that could be, if it's all aerobic, that's fine. But, we would want to kind of do some faster stuff, VO2 max prep stuff or threshold work. And then something longer. And the faster stuff should be shorter. So it's like kind of like things get all over the place a little bit with what you can do, but there's a lot of solutions for you. So if that doesn't answer your question, let's do a consultation or something like that and figure it out. All right. So Pierce, what's up, Pierce? I missed that ride with you and Cam, but I had family stuff going on. All right. Tips on training for Leadville 100 mountain bike race. So I know that's like a big goal of yours. And so the tips are, it's really about the engine and less about technical skills. So some longer races on, technical courses, and you need a good mountain biking handling skills. And Pierce is a motocross rider as well. So I would imagine the technical skills and whatever are good. So you just want as big of an engine as you like, engine and efficiency, right? And so, you want to get some big rides in, right? You want to build up to like time in the saddle. So I worked with a guy. We never ended up getting into Leadville, but we were doing like ultra mountain biking. And you need to keep all the qualities there, so like more polarizer training. So we did like seated power work for 15 seconds, and standing sprints, because if you got to get out of the saddle and be able to handle that. And we kept all the pieces VO2 max threshold. But at a certain point we were like, hey, the main objective here, like the priority scale, so you have uh long ride, weekly volume, and then you have threshold, then you have VO2 max, and then you have like power, your 15-30 second power profile. And the priority is definitely your long ride, getting your long ride up. So and then figuring out the gear, right? Like, what is your setup? Do you want a hardtail? I know you have a full suspension, cross country bike. What tire pressure you're running, all those different things. You can get technical there. But if you're not ready to ride the distance, that would be my first objective. And it's in August, so we live in New York. Pierce is from New York, so lives around me, so you can have the opportunity to get in some bigger long rides. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on the um it doesn't have to be on the mountain bike per se. At first, like, it might be easier to get a long road ride in, and you just like get the distance in first. But mountain's going to be slower, so I would go further. So if I don't know, we can talk more about it. But yeah, that my tips on training for level is get the volume in from now to start building it up, because you don't want to have a big jump in volume. And volume could mean weekly volume, but it also means like 1 day volume. And the way you can break up the 1 day volume is break it up into 2 days. So instead of going out for your first 100-mile ride and you've been doing 40s, like do a 60, then a 40. So you broke it up, you did 100 over 2 days, and then you can go 70, 70, 30, and then 80, 20, and then you can go do 100. And you don't have to be that regimented about it, but these are the kind of things that we're playing with. Um, so yeah, keep asking questions. All right, Austin, how long does it take for your average heart rate to lower? I've been doing 95% of my runs at Z2 for about 6 weeks now, but anytime I try to run faster, my heart rate jumps out of zone 2. Yeah. So this is a quintessential kind of approach. Like, so uh, maybe you can answer it while we're chatting, and while I'm answering the question. But how many days a week are you running? And this is what ends up happening: is you're just not efficient at faster paces. Therefore, the body's like, "What are you doing to me, man? What are you doing? Like, we're getting efficient here, but as soon as you go up to faster, it's not efficient." So this is why it's important to train across a spectrum of velocities and a spectrum of efforts. Um, but it doesn't mean the work you're doing now is not going to benefit you later. So basically, you're building infrastructure. So you're spending the time for 6 weeks to kind of build out the foundation of everything else to come, or the first floor, the first two floors, since it's zone 2, so 1 and 2. You're building up those floors to be like really robust and like cover a lot of area, so that you can build up the pyramid a bit more. So if you only did it for a week, like the base is only this big. And so then it's hard to go very high from there. And so if you build the base bigger, then you're able to go up much higher. All right. So I'm curious, how many times a week do you run? But that's a really good question. So right now, it's not helping you in the short term to run faster, but it will help you in the long term. So to answer your first question, all right, about 3 or 4 runs per week, still pretty new to running, so definitely consider signing up for your New York City half training, even though I won't be attending the race. Yeah, so yeah, and Team Whoopers, we have a group run challenge, and it's definitely there to help educate people. You don't have to do the New York City Marathon, so $300 for 10 weeks is very approachable. And although we're not training specifically to what's going on. It's like you individually, like tweaking all your stuff. We're teaching you how to do that. So, all right. Yeah, 3 or 4 runs per week. So I would say at 6 weeks now, like I would move to like one speedier session, so minute on, minute off, VO2 max on like a Monday, and then Tuesday or Wednesday you do an aerobic run, and maybe you keep the zone 2 to work on it, and then the third run can either be a long run and or a threshold run or progression run, something like that, a little bit longer and a little less taxing, and then you'll get the opportunity to get some more exposure to that. I would say try to get 4 runs in. That would be better served for you over long term, and be careful there. But I bet so. The place where my brain went to is like when I'm working with my athletes and one-on-one and doing all this training over a long period of time, to really see their heart rates come down takes like 12 to 24 months of doing all the things, right? And so even though we're doing all the things, VO2 max, threshold, long runs, aerobic volume, zone 2 runs, neuromuscular work on the bike, kind of my secret sauce. Eventually over time, the first place that the improvement shows up is in aerobic runs, and like it could be 15 to 30 seconds a mile difference, but it takes a really long time. But we do these things where it's like six. Sometimes I've done it with some clients to like reboot them. They're sick or things aren't going so well, and it's like, hey, we're just going to spend time. And I kind of polarize it more, so we'll do leg speed one day a week or twice. That's the high end, fast end, and then on the slow end, we'll just stick with zone 2 run is kind of like I call it the chicken soup for the endurance soul. Like if things aren't going well, like that's a happy place for your body to like figure things out. But you have to do more other velocities and efforts to round yourself out. So um, you're just doing stage 1 of it, and that's okay. So I would progress on to the other things. All right. Any other questions? What's up, AB? Mateo, Lisa, hello. Susie, hello. Claudia, hello. Yeah. So I'll stick on for another like couple minutes if anyone has any questions, but you'll have to go back. I talked about consistency and creating systems that capture the kind of help you be more consistent. And it's not like a lack of discipline. It's often a lack of a system. So I created a product that I'll be putting up for sale. And not like it's just on my mind, consistency, this time of the year as we go into New Year's Eve. It's not going to be ready for a couple of weeks, but yeah, anyway. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all. I'm going to get off and get ready for my first one-on-one call of the day. Monday started a little bit later for me. And yeah, I hope you all have the rest of this time of the year. A lot of people have off or they get off in a couple of days for New Year's or something like that. So I hope you enjoy it. For me, it's a time to be reflective of like kind of like what worked and what for me, I always pick like one thing I want to do better and like a couple important facets of my life. So one in my personal relationships, what's one thing I'm going to try to be better in? And then the other thing is in my business. So every year I try to like do one thing a little bit better and be consistent about it. So 3 years ago or over 2 years ago, this is the third year. It's like my first off, it was like making sure my training plans are done on Sunday, for the client load that I have and getting all my phone calls and getting, the business off the ground. Then it was, you know, uh, my newsletter, like how do I get my thoughts out there and um, build a little bit of my own following of people who are looking to learn and stuff. And then so that newsletter, I was like, okay, what can I commit to? I don't think I can commit to doing something every week, like, go big for it. No, I was like, all right, but like once a month, I don't think people are going to, they're going to get lost in sauce. So I'm like, I can do 2 a month. Right. So on the 1st and 15th of every month. And that's a place for me to like get all my thoughts and ideas into one place. And which helps me coach my athletes better, but it's often topics that I'm discussing multiple times a week. And so, yeah, that's where we get into, I was like, yeah, but let's like commit to this for a year. And then, it's been really good on many levels for a lot of uh, aspects of my business and my coaching. So I've continued for 2 years. I think I've missed 4 3 or 4 days. I was just, like, consolidating all my stuff, like, 2 New Year's first day, like, I was like, "Yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna read it," and that's silly. It's more for me than for other people, and then a couple times I got sick, and I don't get ahead of the newsletter, I write it in between the from the last one to the next one. But that was consistent. Then it was like, but 3 years ago it was, coaching clients and getting everything good. Then 2 years ago it was newsletter. Then last year was more like my training camps, and that will build um, here in New Paltz and whatnot, in my neck of the woods. And then this year is more about like building my brand and business, so understanding my business better and different stuff like that. So anyway, that's what 2026 is about. So comment down below what your New Year's resolutions are, or what you want to be more consistent about in the new year. And if you're interested in just what I have to distill all my newsletters down into like kind of like a 10-page document or a worksheet on how to be more consistent, DM me, let me know when it's available. I will reach out to you. But all right, Pierce, appreciate you, buddy. All right, everyone, have a good one. I'm going to end the live here. See you later.